And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Anthony Francis, who was blown into billions of pieces from what he calls the being he was prior to this incarnation. And as that being, he was shown and healed of his childhood traumas. Anthony, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate you having me on.
Anthony, can we start on the day that you were blown into pieces and go from there?
Sure. Just a little bit of background. So this was about a month ago, this one. Prior to that, I've been on a spiritual journey for a solid spiritual journey with guides, following guidance for about 11 years. And I had experienced some pretty extreme energies and consciousness and guides, and to the point where my being is moved by guidance. And I had come to this point where what moves me, I've known as the being I am. And there's guidance in between the self I am and that being. Guidance that would speak to me, that would lead me through myself. And I had gotten to this place where guidance would channel through me or speak to me, and I would help others with this, help others gain guidance. And yet there was something missing. It was like I was standing on a pedestal of vibrations that were cut off. It was like cut off from this truth. And how I can describe that, for about 2.5, 3 years, there was this, like, if I closed my eyes and said, where is the center of who I am? It felt like it was 2.5, 3 feet in front of me for 2.5, 3 years. So it was this interesting coming to a head, if you will, of this journey I've been on. And by no means do I think it's done. It's like a chapter closing and another one maybe will open up next. So to try to bring you to where I was, I could be in a moment, I could speak words, even though it was guided, and I could feel there was a dissonance. There was almost like I was not speaking truth, like there was something in the vibration that was cut from cloth of old. And I could feel the center of me out in front. I could feel the vitality and the viscousness of what that was. And yet, when I spoke words, it wasn't that. And this was just an awareness, you could say. It's like knowing who I am and knowing what I'm not, which is this deeper truth that I knew that existed. And as the small self, I didn't know how it would come to a head. I didn't know. I thought, is it that this is it and I have to die, when we die, and then I'll know? Or is it going to, be some kind of spiritual spiritual awakening that's beyond what I have experienced? And so I was actually walking back to my boat where I live, and suddenly, and this is beyond anything I'd ever experienced previously, but the sky, literally out of my eyes, I'm looking, the sky was fractaled, like a billion fractals. From my eyes perspective, being would say it from a different perspective, but it was as if there was a billion diamonds of light, all fractaled, coming at me. And as I looked at my hands were fractaled. And I had something in me that knew I had to be off of the dock and in my boat, because I felt like I was going to lose consciousness. I felt like I was going to be taken out by this. It was so powerful. It was like everything was, I can't even describe it properly because it was beyond anything I'd ever experienced. It was like the fabric of reality, I was, as myself, was being pulled apart. And these fractals were, as I was experiencing, I had an awareness that these are all the pieces of my separateness to the greater truth. And as it descended into me, I felt myself being pulled apart. I made it to the boat. I had barely got to the bed, and I just basically blacked out. I don't remember anything other than when I came to. And when I came to, it was the being version of me, the same energy that was in front of me for those 2.5, 3 years, inside me, as me, pushing away everything that was the I and having me look at it as being. And it was, I'll do my best to describe this, but the being is fundamental to the physical self and the consciousness self the I has been acting as. And so when this happened, I was before everything I knew as myself, as the being. So the being was there. It's hard to explain. So I want to say one thing, guys. Fundamentally, you exist before this incarnation, right? A lot of people agree with that. And that being has lived, countless lives. Some would say millions, if more, maybe more. So what would it be like to experience something primordial to yourself? Like literally primordial to the self you've ever known here. That was my experience. It was as if I was in this light box behind everything that my physical sounds, preferences, likes, everything I knew as Anthony, it was pre that. And I got to participate as that being. So it was as if he did me this great favor, not even he, it was more than that, to come into myself behind everything I was, all the fractals, and then it would take these places like where my voice was cut off or I, these different challenges that were in my vibration, it would take it just like it could grab something out of the air and it would take me back to that moment in time. The first place was the womb. It took me right to the womb and we were an essence of that being and we were experiencing together. It was like I was being held by being. It was holding me there, letting me experience what it's like to be layered by the vibrations of this place and how we take that conditioning on the mother, the father, surrounding vibrations and how it gets, we just go down, 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 and we lose connection with who we really are. And then it was 6 months old, a trauma, a year and a half, a trauma, literally there with the young child version of me, experiencing the trauma, experiencing the vibrational range from where that trauma was to the current self and what was before that as the being was there with me. And we got to watch it dissolve and open up the energies into my actual physical body, sounds, feelings that I knew I wasn't able to access or speak. That pedestal I described that I was standing on, an island of somehow apart from truth, my real truth was thinning, live with me, as me. And this led to me feeling like I spoke my first words of my entire life within 2 days. This experience lasted for 5-6 days. And there was a second phase that lasted another 5-6 days, but the intense part lasted 5 days. And I spoke my first words during that time. And it was quite beautiful to, where you feel less than and where you feel insecure and you feel like you don't have a voice or you don't have something that, it's not that I didn't have a voice. I have clients, I have people that love me. I have camaraderie with people. It's just that this awareness that I'm cut from a fabric apart from my truth. And there's a deeper truth to us. And what is it that's keeping that truth from speaking as me? Right now, I'm not fully that being speaking. It's like the being is real close and they're wanting my structure to keep, it's almost like off-gassing. It's like this softening so that the being version of me can come closer. And one thing I'll say about this is that experience, we want to shy away from our weaknesses, or we want to shy away from fear or insecurities. And the being showed me that it's only truth. Seeing who you were cut off from, when you were cut off, and the lineage that came after is just seeing truth, seeing reality as it is. And there's nothing to hide. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's just having a willingness to look at what's real. And on that note, the way being has described this is that they extend, all of us have beings that exist prior to these incarnations. And as they extend essence down into the inception, it starts from a high vibration and it goes down, is how they describe it. Down, down, down. We take on those layers and we're born. We're not a baby, actually. We're this being. We have a likeness in us then. It may be full of conditioning at that point, but there is a likeness of your being there. We all notice babies and young kids having bright lights, but they're raised by adults who have heavy conditioning that think they know. And the layered baby part doesn't know to hold on. Maybe some do, but in my experience, I wasn't able to hold on to myself, that sensitivity I had. It was as if everyone else knew what was right for me, and I didn't have a say in it. And so the way they describe it is it's like a prism. You have a prism, and if you can hold that, great, off of your light. And then what happens, we have breaks. We break off of that prism, and we go into another, and another, and another. And at some point, we get down the road, maybe 14, 16, 18, 20, and we finally decide, this is who I'm going to be. This is it. I'm not listening here as much. I'm going to do this. And then that grows. And that's who we think we are. So that's my direct experience. I'm not telling anyone what they know or think isn't right. I'm just speaking from my own experience with being and just my journey, just to be clear. I mean, it's clear there's such a unique spread of experiences out there, and we all somehow weave in as one truth when we're all figuring that out together. So I'm just speaking on my own, just what I've learned from my own path.
The day that you were walking on the dock and this happened to you, were you going through some type of spiritual crisis, or is there some catalyst that caused this to happen?
That's where I'd have to give you the backstory and lead you back up to that point, maybe. What I would say is there was no spiritual crisis other than what I described, which is the spiritual journey of 11 years where my heart awakened, and in a way that means the being version of me moved me. It would move me. It started deciding everything. It writes everything. And yet what spoke me was at odds with what moved me and what I felt like was my center. So the spiritual crisis, I guess, is that I was being kind of isolated on this island of I, as far as truth speaking purely, and awakening, in a lot of different ways, psychically, spiritually, perceiving guides, the energy of that viscous center. Like I didn't feel like the center of me was here. It felt like it was off of me. And what being has told me is that they did that on purpose so that I can know who I am, know the truth from my own perspective. Because something blasting into you and you think this is who you are could be quite traumatic. They said you had to know that truth yourself first before it could evolve. And so, yes, it was a bit of a crisis in a sense of identity, of who I am and what my truth is.
The way I interpret what you're saying is, and I can be completely wrong, but I see that the being you speak of is your higher self.
Yeah.
And some people will say that our consciousness is non-local. It's really not in one place, but kind of everywhere. And it appears to me you're kind of describing your consciousness coming from in front of you.
Yeah.
kind of in a non-local way. It sounds like that to me, like you're getting in touch, or you're getting in communication with your higher self that's almost directing you.
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate. I think for me, I've been in touch with my higher self for 10 years, direct guidance and following that. And it's led me to this knowing that anything the eye, and this is from my journey, this is from my experience, the eye is in some way a separation in vibration to that higher self.
People have probably heard me say this more than once, and I look at the higher self as the complete self. It's like
Right.
not in this incarnation, wherever we are is everything. And
Exactly.
we're just here as like a filtered, limited version of ourselves.
Okay, that's accurate as far as I understand it in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Jeff.
I think throughout this journey with your higher self and looking at your childhood and other aspects of your life, you also went into a past life and experienced a near-death experience, or an
That's
NDE.
right.
Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So this was a few years ago, and I was, watching channels like yours and just having my own experience with other people's journeys. And what I can say is that I went into a sort of trance experience, and I had no awareness of my actual physical body. And I found myself in another place. This other place was a battlefield in World War II. I was in a tank. I was a tank crewer. I think I was based on what I got, an officer in the British Army. And there was 3 of us in the tank at the time. I had been killed. We'd been struck. Our tank was disabled. And I rose out of the body and, I went from this very compressed place, right? Where you're just in this fear and this just dense place. And I rose up out above the tank, probably 20, 30 feet above the tank. And all I could do from that place is see how small the tank looked. It looked like a little toy car. And I was just in this disbelief that I could have possibly come from within inside that tank, let alone the body I knew I was just in. So that was almost the whole experience. I was sitting there just in this wonder about how that is possible, because it didn't seem possible to fit inside the tank, let alone the body inside the tank. And that led me to some OBEs around that same idea, like how people leave their bodies and are not aware that they've left their bodies, like that phenomenon where people are outside of it talking to the nurse is ignoring them, that one, and yet they don't realize they're out of their body, and that's why the nurse can't hear them. So I've had some OBEs that tie right in, if you would like me to go into this, Jeff.
Sure.
I'll just say the one that's most pertinent. It's an OBE where I was able to leave the body and have complete awareness of what was going on. And the first time I could say I could not feel the sensation of leaving. Went back in, reassimilated, back out with even more acute awareness, and there was just a slight energy disturbance. Okay, back in again, leave, and again, you could just barely feel it. So then guides came in really strong on the 4th attempt, and they showed me that it's the space all around is what we are. We're not really as confined in the bodies as we think. So the next time it was as if the space moved and the physical body just stayed in place, but the space moved. And from there, I'm just going to say we expanded out greater than the earth as the earth dropped away, see the thin blue line, and accelerated out towards what felt like we were going to expand towards the size of the universe. And then it paused. You could see the stars, and then right back. And I just spoke that one because for me, it's like not so much about leaving the body, it's about how it works. Like, what is this consciousness stuff? How is it that we're in these bodies and we can be out and so big? And so I've come to feel like the space around me at all times. Like I am in the space, not just in the body. So I think it helps to know this when we're trying to know who we are and what's real, and that we truly do exist before, and that these bodies are just representing it's like a filter to something. It's like it's place and time, it's not the whole of who we are.
Were you ever shown what was going on before this life, and like if you made some type of soul contract or anything?
Here's one thing with my journey is I think what I signed up for was to unidentify as much as possible with this I. Because I've been to places where there's like a Rolodex almost of past lives, and it's the I that I feel as myself that would be curious. And I've been learning that I need to soften that to awaken more of my truth, which is being. And, but yes, there's been close encounters with a range of past lives that the being has lived. But really when I'm there, it's been shown to me that, see, what's interested is the I here. The being already lived those lives. The being knows them all. So the I that's curious is in some way blocking his evolution. So that's really a continuous message in my own journey. And I say my own lightly. It's because I think that's what I signed up for. I signed up to try to unidentify with love in the way that I thought love was, so that it can rebirth to something higher. And that's happened. All the feelings, basically. I was guided to unidentify with what I thought was kindness, what I thought was joy. Meaning, where I was 10 years ago, what joy was the illusion of getting away from not joy, or love was being seen or being heard or being, cared for, because there was a wound, deep wounds of not that. And so it was this deep duality. And so the guidance has led me through this dualistic consciousness of I, more to what is the space around me that is like it's almost like a viscous frequency that just holds, and that's becoming more of the replacement of these things. And you hear people talk about, being in heaven and the white light, and it's beyond anything of this realm, and it's beyond words. I think we can bring it here if we realize that we have taken on the separation of this place, and we've taken it on as our identity. And I think people speak to this in so many different ways, but the softening of who we think we are, especially if it's like we have a dog in the fight, those ones, the ones where you feel offended or you feel like it's really something you want, just softening the edges around that. I think people that I guide and help, guides guide through me, have led people to these type of conclusions themselves. They don't tell them what to think. They just let them discover that truth for themselves, because ultimately it's our own journey,
Now, when you're speaking of your guides, are they separate beings from your higher self?
This has been an interesting journey with that question, because the I was 10 years ago, it's like we make up stories about what we think it is, or somehow reflecting our own vibrations. And then as I evolved, the guidance would evolve. So it seemed to be tied to where I was vibrationally. Early on, there was many guides. And then as I evolved, it became more or less one guide, which is my being, the previous being that I was. There's on occasion others, but really it's, let's see if I'm answering your question properly. I think it's vibrational. That's what my current awareness is about it. It's like there was a big shift in how I understood being from the range of guidance pre, being obliterated by all that light, and after. And even before that, I would have said it was being, but one who's in a box who's never seen doesn't really know what being is. It's his interpretation. So I think I had an interpretation that was somehow in my vibration. And as I got deeper healing, I have a deeper awareness of what guides are now. So it's really just higher vibration version, I would say. And they're more inclusive in a way that I couldn't have imagined of all that I am. It's like, see if there's another way of putting it. I would say, we want to not have fear and we want to, be confident, but the fears block us is from what being says. Being says that our light lies behind the fears. We have a tendency as humans, and this is my own experience and people I've worked with, to turn away from fear and whatever idea of what that is be who we are, maybe the illusion of getting away from that fear. And being says your light and your truth is behind the fears. So to answer your question, if I have fear still in me in places, that's going to skew the validity or my valid perception of what guides are, because I'm skewed. I'm in a vibration that's lower.
Do you feel that you are channeling being or your higher self?
Well, to that point, being comes in. Right now, that's been a lot of my eye. There's structures in my eye that are benefiting from re-knowing and cleaning up through having this experience with you and the audience. And being, when it comes in, I would say it's similar to channeling, except for, and this is maybe something I should have said earlier, it's when I am in my being self, I'm looking at all that I am as my I self, and I can tell you it is the truth of me relative to where I've come from. So when I'm speaking as my I can feel the, little insecurities or the little things that I haven't gone through yet as far as re-knowing. And being, when it comes in, it's more like this is home. This is the truth. And this is the truth that's been behind all the fears and everything that I've ever participated in as myself. And so when being comes in, it's kind of this ebb and flow. It hasn't come in during this yet, but it's close. It's letting my I have this experience with you, tell the story, and re-know anything that can be re-known. So I would say I have channeled. There was a group that I channeled for about a month, 6 months ago. And that's very much like I'm sitting here as myself, the group energy comes in and they would speak. And that was channeling. Being, it's as if it comes in through my heart and swells up and meets me here, and almost, it's like I'm pulled to the side, but I'm really, really just aware of all the structures that would block who I really am. That's the best the eye can describe as it, I think.
How do you help others to gain guidance?
Yeah, this started in 2017 when I had the collapsing of thought experience where I couldn't speak for 2 months. And after that cleared, I was just guided from that place to, and it's not with a website, it's just tendrils, people I connect with. They're on the path, they're on the journey. And often it's the people who recognize patterns in their life. They're like love, oh, this is the one. And then it doesn't end up being the one. And then again and again, or money, or what they are going to do for purpose. There's just a likeness, a resonance. And I would always let guidance choose who we're to work with, because something I found is dear to my purpose is aligning with people that I can actually help, not just having a bunch of people that I'm trying to help. So guidance would always decide. So your question was?
How do you help others gain guidance?
Yeah, I would basically channel people's guidance for them. And it starts there. And they usually give them some awarenesses about what's going on. And this is the old version. Being is now doing it with my current clientele and is more powerful. It's more, psychic, if I could say. They just go into psychic structures and they hold them as me and they talk to the person about it. And it's very honest, very real, not hiding is what they say. We're not hiding from anything. So it's evolved, and yet it has that same channeling something higher for the person so that they can take it or leave it, but basically try to resonate with what's being said and allow for that to help lift their vibration.
Do you feel that guidance, or what I call your higher self, has upgraded you over the years?
Absolutely. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. It's really the main reason why I was able to keep going, because my old self would say it was about dying to who I was, because the I was attached to who he was. Like he was holding on to it like it's all he had. And so that first phase, 5, 6, 7 years ago, was dying to my old self. But now it's really a reknowing, a coming home, a living and higher integrity, really, because it's almost a choice now. It's becoming a choice. I feel the tendrils of old, and it's like, no. I think everyone can relate with this. If you imagine like your 14-year-old self, that's still a part of you, and yet would you want to step back into that and let that be who you are? No. So if you change in a short period of time, 10 years, stages along, I can look back and go, I am not the same person many times over, even from a month ago. So I'm now just seeing the painting that's, the writing on the wall, if you will. That none of that I think is who I am is who I am. And it can just keep renewing. It can keep softening. And I've accepted that. So that helps it not being a dying to self experience and more of a just knowing who I am, knowing the truth. And that's what being would say. Know thyself.
Are you in control of when you are communicating with your higher self? It's
a continuum now. In 2017, it's like my heart started moving me, and that was being, but at the time I just knew it was guides, and that was strange a little bit. But it's as if it's like wind or a strong wind or a current, and that grew from inside my heart. And it just grew and grew to where it's every finger, every movement is being that moves me. So hear what's being said. I'm being moved. So there's what's moving, and then there's what's being moved. So my experience from when it started is that I was very strongly being moved, means I'm really identified as myself that's being moved. And then over time, there's an overlap where I can be moved by being and yet not speak it, but if you have an overlap there, that feels like I am that. And also I'm aware of the delineated line of what's deeper inside me, that is the I that's being moved. So it's kind of like this coming together that's always there. It's in my dreams, it's in my lucid dreams, it's in my out of body. I'm never without it anymore. It's this constant experience. Now being decides how strong they're coming in and how much they're having the I participate to keep, thinning the veil of the layers within my vessel.
It appears that the way you experience love has evolved over time. How do you define love now?
I'll just say this. Before, love was a feeling that I was identified with. After reclaiming and reknowing that, love is knowing the truth of someone, knowing who they are really, like knowing that they are a being of light. And anything that says other than that in my being or their being, I know is some kind of vibrational conditioning. And so me loving another is just first holding them in truth, knowing who they are, and then having awareness of anything in me that shows up that's not supporting that. So it could be that something, you feel something, and then you just have awareness, you have presence, and you let that soften. And then that leads me to a present moment, or I'm not seeing them through a lens of something inside. I'm seeing them just present moment, knowing who they are and connecting there. And if anything rises up during that time, I let it fall away. And then there's a sweet spot. There's a sweet spot, which I would say is kindness. It's this kindness that's grown from participating in that way. And I think it's still evolving. I think I can still evolve more because I'm not home. I'm not where my true being is. So there's still that gap. I think for anyone, if you see patterns of how you've hurt people, then that's a place to obviously soften and reclaim. And then where you hurt yourself through worrying about past or future versions of your love, that's something we can deal with very directly. And then it becomes the present moment of, for me, this how we are seeing a person. Is it, is it pure? Are we knowing thyself? Are we being honest with ourselves? And that's where I'm at.
Were you ever shown why we keep reincarnating over and over?
I was. It doesn't mean there's not a higher truth. It's just this is the peak of where I'm at with that question. What being showed me was that this is where, it's a two-part question. It's basically, or an answer rather. It's, we incarnate to grow our being. We also incarnate to grow this vibrational place. So how it's been shown and described is that we embed our essence deep into this vibrational place, and we entangle with all the vibrations. It's very specific. It's known. Your father, your mother, you're going in there. You're going to be layered and entangled with all of that. And you're likely going to, at this point, 14 years old, choose that that's who you are. And upon everyone's death, all those vibrations you're entangled with brings the fabric, lifts the fabric back with you. So on your reunion with who you truly are, you're taking all those layers of separation and reclaiming them to a higher light. So that's the answer. But apart from that, why we keep coming is from what I've been shown, is like we start here and we grow our being here. So we really grow through everything, all the vibrational spectrum here until it's complete and it's all reclaimed back to your truth. So I don't know if it's a full realization here or if it's just you have to experience everything, but it's not an experience as in how we would think of it, like we have to experience it. It's literally this absolute law of vibrations you're experiencing and partaking in or entangled with are reclaimed and brought back to the source. That's how I've come to understand it. And once we've done that, we won't have to incarnate here.
Do you think God is a separate being from us, or we are all collectively God?
I think it's both. From what I understand, God is similar to being, but he holds all the beings. And our lives here can see that same truth. You have a 3-year-old self, a 7-year-old self, 14, 21, 29, 40. You can look back and go, God, those were very different aspects of myself, and yet they're all right here. All of them are expressing through you. So the way I understand it is very similar to that. God is all of the beings and everything that's under it as one, and everything exists that's under it. So like Jeff, when you go home, Jeff still exists within that being that you truly were before Jeff existed. It's just, we live in this, we don't see it as a multidimensional reality. And so it's harder for us to make sense of that. But we're doing it. We're all kind of getting there. I think it's more real than we realize. Like that being could take me back to a 3-year-old moment, a 2-year-old moment in the womb, 1 year old, 6 months old. And I can see it as clear as watching a movie and like standing there. It's realer than a movie because I was there. I was there as the high chair fell over and, I hit my head, and these things that I had no memory of when I was 6 months old. I was literally there as the being, how he saw it, how my being saw it. So that is possible, just like a life review, shows us that there's, we all know this, it's so much more than this limited view we have. But it does help us to know thyself, right? We have all these videos, we have all these testimonials of people, experiences that start to paint this picture that we live in a universe that's much more than we think. And all of that, in my opinion, helps us know ourselves. Because if we can truly know who we are, know thyself, know that you exist purely apart from everything here that you think you are, then that allows people to look in on themselves and see where they maybe are proactively or like unconsciously keeping themselves apart. They can recognize the patterns and they can begin softening those patterns. And because they on some level can connect because of everyone else's experiences that have been, just everywhere, they can start to believe. And if you believe, you can start to know thyself. And you won't have to hold on by fear. You won't have to do that rat race the same way. You can just start to let go a little bit, and your life will change. You will see the change.
Well, how did all of this start for you?
I'll make it quick because what we just talked about is more poignant, but I will just say that I was in a relationship back in 2011, and this beautiful woman was very sensitive and had connection with guides, but she didn't know it. I'm just going to say that. And I woke up to her crying, and this is pre-guidance. This is pre me even knowing that heaven exists or anything exists. I was just an I doing I things, trying to succeed, trying to do whatever. So I woke up to her kind of freaking out. And it woke me up. This is New Year's Eve, 2011. And I talked to her, and she was really upset, like she was having a psychotic break. And I was just trying to be a good partner and just, be calm and help her through it. And finally she got out, like, she got woken up by a loud ringing in her ear. And when the ringing cleared, there was a voice speaking to her. And well, inside, I felt that like that's kind of cool, but I was trying to be like, just reasonable for where she was. And I said, okay, well, what's the voice saying? And she hadn't asked. She was just telling it to go away because her dad, I believe, had like schizophrenia or something, and she had fear that she was always going to get it. So I think this was like a fear of psychotic break versus what actually happened. Okay. I asked her, what's the voice saying? And she said, and I'll just leave out the dialogues of panic and fear. She said, the voice says that I am your spiritual guide and I'm here to help you. I said, well, that's not so bad. And about that time, there's a loud ringing in her other ear. It cleared, there's another voice. One was male, this one was female. I said, well, what's this voice saying? And she said, this voice is saying that it is your guide, my guide. Now, this was about an hour long, and she was in complete panic mode, and it was really about trying to get her calm so she could even ask anything, but I want to leave that out. So this voice that came through said, I was your sister. I was in the womb with you, and I died. I lost air, and I'm coming to connect with you so that you can know what you're to do. You are in this lower vibrational place. You believe you're defensive. She called them defensive reactions, and you're to rise above that. I was not aware that I had a twin or a full brother or sister. So in my mind, I thought, this is easy. I'll call my mom up and say, hey, what's up? So I call her up the next day thinking that she's going to say, no, of course, it was just one. Because maybe my partner is having an issue. No, what happened is my mom cried. And she wouldn't answer. And then she said, I always wanted to tell you. She's like, I smoked during the pregnancy. And I lost your twin. And I've never told you. And I've had this guilt my whole life wanting to tell you. That's how it all started. It gave me belief that it exists, that it's real. And that just motivated me. I just started a new business, and I basically walked away within a few years from everything and just followed guidance. It took me 1 year to get direct guidance myself, doing meditation retreats. I did like 12 of them, 10-day silent, really intense, and just really went after it. I wouldn't recommend that. I had a lot of ego and a lot of I trying to do it, but I would recommend get to a place of knowing that this is truth, that you exist before this place, and let that be your own truth. And from there, it'll just blend naturally for where you are to go. So that was my entry into this.
Your sister was coming through your girlfriend at the time.
Yeah.
As life has moved forward with you, are you now able to communicate with her?
Well, I did. So that's where a year later, almost exactly, I was able to connect with her directly. And we spoke for just, God, it was like under 2 weeks. And a guide came in very strongly and said, that'll be the end of this communication with your sister. It'll be now with the guide, because she needs to reincarnate again. So it was very heartfelt, very sweet, and very beautiful. And it was like a great gift to be able to have that gift of belief. And that's how it all started for me.
Anthony, after watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you up for that?
Yes, of course. Just my email, anthony@conscioushelpers.com.
Before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Know thyself truly, and know thyself here where you're at odds with that truth. And if you can see that behind fear is who you really are, then you will no longer fear fear. You will no longer turn away from fear. You will embrace the opportunity that fear is, which is a way to get closer to your light, which is to transmute it, to change it, to become present with it, and watch as your life changes and your truth comes near.
Anthony, thank you for that message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.